Unless all you're looking for is more than 300 days a year of sunshine, crystal clear sea, and the kind of getaway from it all that you can find on any desert island, it's difficult to think about Malta without being aware of history. And Malta's history met up with mankind about 7,000 years ago. But long before man came along, Malta was right on the prehistoric animal freeway that joined Africa to what is now Italy. Dwarf elephants and giant dormice have long disappeared from the surface of the earth, but far below there are still wonders waiting to be discovered, especially in Malta. Millions of years later, when this landmass had become an island, an animal developed that was able to cross oceans. An animal that believed in gods that had to be worshipped. As man developed, so did his sophisticated religion. Circular and cloven-shaped temples that are echoed further west in France and Britain. Subterranean temples. and goddesses to be worshipped. The museums of archaeology in Malta and the sister island of Gozo are particularly rich. Primitive Maltese man and woman might have arrived by sea, but after they decided to stay, they became gatherers and tillers of the earth. Later, much later, this little group of islands was visited and conquered many times by peoples on their way to something bigger and better. Phoenicians opening up trade routes, Greeks peddling democracy, and Carthaginians and Romans doing battle on every front. The Carthaginians defended their islands as a key strategic base, but eventually in 218 BC, Roman rule was established. This was to last over 1,000 years. Their colonization seems to have been a liberal one, the islands once more becoming a staging post for journeys further afield. The Romans built their city on the site of present-day Mdina and Rabat. And it was in Mdina, in AD 60, that St. Paul met the Roman governor, Publius. Accompanied by St. Luke, Paul had been on his way to Rome to be tried when they were shipwrecked on the small islands later called St. Paul's Islands in St. Paul's Bay. Paul and Luke stayed 3 months. Their teaching must have been very convincing because Governor Publius converted to Christianity and later became the first bishop of Malta. The present and previous cathedrals in Mdina are believed to have been built on the site of the Roman governor's villa. In times of war, religious persecution has reared its ugly head since time immemorial, right up to the present day. But in times of peace, there seems to have been an extra special kind of tolerance. There are many catacombs in Malta, which were used at different times for clandestine meetings, as churches, and underground cemeteries. And perhaps synagogues, because, interestingly, a Jewish catacomb has also been found. During the Dark Ages, there were many rival attacks and temporary domination by Christians or Muslims. But when the smoke of battle had blown away, the two communities developed an amicable system of live and let live. After Muslim victory, the Christians in the area were given the choice of moving away, or converting to Islam, or paying a tax. After the Christians won, the Muslims were given the same choice. Most seem to have decided that staying in Malta was more important than the matter of switching religions, or a small tax-deductible fine. The islands were under predominantly Arab rule from 870 AD for 200 years. And this was generally beneficial, not only to Malta, but also further north in Europe, where mathematics, poetry, and architecture were all positively influenced. But at the end of the first millennium, Christians from all over were on the move. There was a belief or fear that the year 1000 would be the signal for something tremendous, the second coming of Christ, or the end of the world. The Christian holy places had to be protected from the non-believers. Unfortunately, these places were also of importance to the Muslims and Jews who lived there. There began an age of bloody crusades. After the Battle of Hastings in 1066, William of Normandy became King William of England. About the same time, another branch of his family was making conquests much further south. Tancred of Hauteville ruled southern Italy. In 1085, his son Roger the Norman took Sicily, and in 1090, Malta. Count Roger is said to have given a piece of his own family standard to the Maltese, who added a second field of white to complete the national flag, which is how it looks today. Again, a time of relative peace coincided with religious tolerance. Until, that is, a census was taken in 1240, when it was discovered that there were more Muslims and Jews on the islands than there were Christians. Over the next 10 years, the Muslims were expelled from Malta, or they converted to Christianity. Malta had long since passed under the rule of very greedy landlords, Spaniards from Aragon and later Castile, who exploited the islands and the people for almost 200 years. The Knights' Hospitals of St. John of Jerusalem had administered to the sick, but had also taken up arms to defend themselves. Chased from Cyprus and later Rhodes, where they stayed for over 200 years, the Knights Grand Master, Villiers de l'Isle d'Adam, asked Pope Clement VII for a new home for the order. The Pope turned to the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, who was also Charles I of Spain and ruler of Malta. An agreement was quickly reached. In 1530, the emperor accepted token rent of 1 hunting falcon a year, and the knights agreed to protect this last outpost of Christianity. The Knights decided to make their capital in Birgu, one of the cities around the biggest natural harbor in Europe. They built more fortifications while continuing to battle the Turks at sea and on land. As a reprisal for the Knights' continued aggression, Sinan Pasha and Dragut Reis kidnapped the whole population of Gozo in 1551 and then captured Tripoli. From their 7 auberges, or officers' messes, for the different nationalities or langues of the order, the Knights looked to their defenses. In 1552, the Knights built Fort St. Elmo on the headland of Mount Chabaras to protect the other side of the harbor. A new Grand Master, Jean Parisot de la Valette, was elected in 1557 and renewed the building of defenses. On the 18th of May, 1565, 138 Turkish galleys arrived with 38,000 men and over 50 cannons. The first great siege of Malta began. The Turks attacked Fort St. Elmo from all sides and bombarded the fort with cannonballs from Mount Chabaras. The defenders held out until the 23rd of June. But the Turks had lost 8,000 men, including their commander Dragut Reis. In revenge, the Turks tied the few survivors to crosses and threw them into the harbor. Suleiman then attacked Birgu from the land. Finally, there was hardly a house left standing, but de la Valette and what remained of his 600 knights and 9,000 men-at-arms refused to surrender, and the Turks were finally driven off on the 26th of August. With the arrival on the 7th of September of an expeditionary force of 8,500 men-at-arms and 250 knights sent by the Viceroy of Sicily, Suleiman and what was left of his fleet fled back to Constantinople. In all, he had lost 30,000 men. Grandmaster de la Valette had learned his lesson. Mount Chabaras would be the key to any future defense of the harbor. On the 26th of March, 1566, La Valette laid the foundation stone of the magnificent new city. Over the next few years, under Girolamo Cassar's supervision, the magnificent fortress city of Valletta was built. But these huge ramparts and bastions were never put to the test. At the Battle of Lepanto in 1571, Suleiman's fleet was completely destroyed. He would never again be a threat to the now Christian Mediterranean. History is rarely a series of simple facts that a list of dates might suggest. For years, Suleiman had had an ally in Europe, the French King Francois I. Although the Order of Hospitallers had been formed in Jerusalem by Italian merchants, over the years it had been France that had provided the majority of knights, and of the 77 grandmasters, 44 of them were French. The knights were the beneficiaries of double nationality. So in a certain sense, these battles were like so many European wars, family squabbles on a grand scale. In 1789, things changed dramatically in France, and over the next few years in the whole of Europe. The Maltese also hoped to throw off the yoke of foreign kings and the now corrupt knights, some of whom ironically were also supporters of the French Revolution. So, for a variety of reasons, when Grandmaster Hampèche treasonably handed the city over to Napoleon on the 12th of June, 1798, there wasn't a shot fired in anger. However, the French quickly became unwelcome guests. Although they expelled the knights from the islands and confiscated their property in France, they also looted many of the Maltese churches and national treasures, and their treatment of the Maltese was worse than that of the knights. The Maltese population started an insurrection. A delegation begged help from the British fleet. Lord Nelson obliged by blockading General Henri Vaubois and his 4,000 men inside Valletta. 2 years later, near to starvation, the French garrison surrendered. And the British were invited to protect Malta. That was the beginning of 160 years of an often uneasy love affair with the British Empire. The Maltese population wanted more autonomy or even independence, but that was a question that would have to wait many years to be answered. Meanwhile, 1/3 of the population, 65,000 people, had migrated around the Mediterranean basin by the early 1900s. Manpower, Malta's primary raw material. The islands had served as a hospital for the injured from the Dardanelles in the First World War. But in World War II, Malta again found herself almost alone against overwhelming odds. The Italians attempted suicide missions by sea. Deep inside the massive walls and bastions of Valletta are the Lascaris war rooms, the underground operations center used by the commanders of Britain's armed forces, which are now a museum to the period that the islands were under constant attack. The Germans dive-bombed. Between June 1940 and the autumn of 1943, Valletta and the three cities suffered 2,500 air raids and 5,000 civilian casualties. Faith, one of the three famous gladiators, faith, hope, and charity. And for poor Mr. Schicklgruber, Malta was proving a real thorn in the flesh. His Majesty King George VI awarded the George Cross to the heroic people of Malta, and President Roosevelt also sent a warm message.
When this war is won, as it surely will be, it must be one of our aims to work to establish a state of society where the advantages and privileges which hitherto have been enjoyed only by a few shall be far more widely shared by the many and by the youth of the nation as a whole.
Malta had had more bombs dropped on it than any other place on Earth, the equivalent of the Coventry Blitz every 18 hours for a month. Even though the war was now over, life was still very hard. And although self-government was accorded in 1947, the Maltese continued to emigrate at an alarming rate. Over 38,000 left between 1946 and 1953, more than 14% of the population. Manpower. 1947 was a turning point in Louis Portelli's life. As a 17-year-old schoolboy, he decided to be a sports broadcaster, and he first heard Monsignor Azzopardi speaking on the radio.
madwara indunat illi ġrat ħaġa illi waqt it-trattament naqas l-imbit. Il-Madonna kienet taf li ma ġemba għandha l-bina.
As a sports reporter, Louis Portelli has covered every Olympic Games and Soccer World Cup since 1960 for Maltese TV and radio.
مشين بيناتهم قدين راس مبراسك كيف تنقسم دقس 100 سنيار بيش يسبيتشاو فاجلي الفيتسر وهذا الاول ماينز الثاني كير الثالث كيف يدخل الاحمر ستريت على الاحمر ميد كاردا تجري اجي عند هاتنا ابلاوز تاع البوبليكو ماينز صحيح هو في التورنمنت الليد مع تاع نيوزيلاند زنال مش اتهليه دبت يا اصلا بالساعه 20 يارده يطلع
Louis Portelli wears several different hats.
اللي في العرض شيء زنال تاع نيوزيلاند ربح له بشبيت الثاني ماينز الثالث كير تالانتيليز.
He works in public relations and liaised with the White House for the Bush-Gorbachev summit. And he's PRO for Monsignor Azzopardi's brainchild, the Dar tal Providenza Villas for the Handicapped.
Don Michiel, as he's affectionately known, had his lifetime wish granted. In fact, he's buried here under a very simple epitaph, Il-Habib tat-tfal u tal-morda, the friend of the sick and of the children. And in fact, he didn't use his title of Monsignor, just plain Don Michiel Azzopardi. Although Monsignor Azzopardi will forever be remembered as the man of all seasons who started off the Data Providenza, I think that one of the greatest things Monsignor Azzopardi did in his lifetime was to educate the Maltese public that having a sick or a handicapped child in the family was no disgrace at all.
In this day and age, you don't get far without money. Monsignor Azzopardi started off with a donation of just £100.
With those £100, today we have got these 3 villas and we have 123 residents there as our beloved children. This place, which was used during the war as an RAF rest camp for the sick and the wounded airmen, has now been completely refurbished and completely rebuilt. Work started in 1965 with the first villa, named after our beloved Archbishop Monsignor Gonzi. In fact, he gave and donated a lot of money for the building of that first villa. Then we moved on to the second villa, where we are now, named after Pope John the 23rd, Papa Giovanni. And after that, we had the third villa, named after Papa Luciani, Pope John Paul I, who, as everybody knows, was Pope for only 30 days.
In just 50 years, through real communication, the Maltese have developed a refreshingly open attitude to physical and mental handicap, personal contact, and communication.
The aim behind these homes is not to have people to come here and live here all their lives, but to give them the chance to find a substitute for their home and eventually be as independent as possible, have independent living, and to be integrated in society as possible. At the moment, and we have been working on it for the last 2 years or so, we have picked a small group of girls that will eventually have a flat, an apartment on their own in the nearby town. You might ask why the nearby town. Of course, to make this experiment as workable as possible, to have it as handy as possible with us. The group is a group of girls who have lived here all their lives, and with one exception, they all have learning difficulties. So one of them is physically, but very severely physically handicapped. But the others do have learning difficulties, and we have to make up for that. But it is proving to be very, very practical. I mean, we have seen these girls living on their own for the last year or year and a half in this preliminary stage. And as I said, towards the end of the year, we hope to have them live on their own in their own flat. They're looking forward to it, and they are happy to be able to get this achievement in life. This is going to be a new chapter, not only for them, but for us. But to think of it, why are we all here? We are here exactly to help our residents to be able to fly out, to be able to live fully as possible.
In those difficult times in the 50s and 60s, if you didn't have a job in the docks, work was often hard to come by. Some people turned to older arts and crafts. What had been an attempt to scratch a living has since grown into an important wing of the economy. In this technological age, the most adventurous and cheapest way of seeing Malta is from the famous or infamous Maltese buses. Marsa has changed over the years. This shallow bay is where Nelson and just about every other admiral before him sheltered his fleet. St. Lucian Tower, the old knight's fortress, is now a marine laboratory. And now huge oil tankers tie up at the new facility. There's a free port. The brightly colored fishing boats and the market have been fixtures for centuries. Marsa also has one of the many and various fish farms around the islands. You could attend a different church every day of the year on Malta. St. Mary's in Masta is impressive in many ways. Intended as a replica of a Roman pantheon, the unsupported dome is the third largest in the world, 39.6 meters in diameter, compared with 42.06 meters of St. Peter's in Rome. In April 1942, a 500-pound bomb was dropped through the dome while a service was in progress. It bounced off interior walls twice and skidded the whole length of the church. Not one of the congregation of 300 was injured. The stone of Mazda Church in its natural state. And on an island where almost every spare piece of ground is cultivated, disused quarries are providing ideal for planting orchards. Planting things on Malta has become an important issue.
Just over 30 years ago, television was a very, very new thing for Malta. But it was an excellent medium for coming across with my message of more greenery, please. I was given the chance as a young man to start television programs on gardening. And I must say, after an initial hesitation, these programs were received extremely well. And thanks to them, a little gardening revolution was slowly. It was a silent revolution at first, something which grew very, very, very slowly, like one of the shrubs that I prefer to see growing here in Malta. It grows slowly but surely. What happened was that concurrently with my preaching, because I don't want to take full credit for this, the development of tourism in Malta made it necessary for the island to become more green. People were saying this piece of rock in the Mediterranean must have been green at one time, so why don't we make it green again? And so it is. And it is really one of my greatest pride and joys to be driving around and knowing that I had something to do with this wonderful thing that has happened to our little island. But fortunately for us Maltese, this enthusiasm from the entrepreneurs and from the government has also rubbed off to the private individual. We are now seeing home gardens that are being designed as the construction goes on. This was something quite unheard of before, of course, because nobody could budget for this. Whereas now a new mentality is coming in, knowing that people have to budget in order to have nice gardens. And we have introduced landscape designers to work for us here from many parts of Europe, bringing in new ideas with them. And hopefully we will carry on doing this in order to make sure that our island is not just green where the money is, but green in everybody's home. Now people are beginning to think green right through, not just expecting other people to do it, but actually wanting to do it themselves. People are looking for entertainment within their own homes, and they can't have this unless they have greenery around them which they can enjoy. Now gardens are on the inside, people can enjoy them in strict privacy of their own home with their own families, and I think this is the way of life for the future. And I hope that this impetus that has given to planting will be sustained for many, many years to come, and this little rock in the Mediterranean will become a little green spot in the Mediterranean.
But the thing that will help it to stay green is water. And water has always been a problem on Malta. In the past 15 years, there's been another silent revolution. Drinking water from seawater is now a viable process. Reverse osmosis plants now provide enough drinking water to make the islands completely autonomous for the first time for many decades. Salt from seawater. Using a system which has hardly changed since the time of the Romans, Manuel Cini's family have been extracting high-grade sea salt from these salt pans on Gozo for over 160 years. 6 generations. Over the summer season, Manuel, his wife, son, and daughter package over 20 tons. Manuel also wears 2 different hats. In the other half of the year, he works for Malta Telecom. Drinking water from seawater salt from seawater, and money from seawater. The Mediterranean film studios do incredible things with deep water tanks, airplane propellers, and water chutes. This, believe it or not, is what remains of raising the Titanic. A U-boat or a Viking Drakkar. Wind machines. The biggest film water tank you can find. Huge water chutes. And Popeye Village. Malta is a living film set with a unique deep water tank. The Maltese crystal clear waters and beaches are no longer the private playground of British service families. Tourists have come back to Malta. The islands are also on the direct north-south migration route of many species of birds. The uninhabited island of Filfla is a protected sanctuary for flora and fauna. Filfla is a bird sanctuary. But on the mainland, some of the birds are not so lucky. Tradition. Hunting is as incomprehensible to people who oppose it as their attitude is incomprehensible to the hunters. But tradition dies hard. Remember the rent the knights had to pay? One Maltese hunting falcon a year. But some Maltese, hundreds, thousands of them, are happier to look at the birds rather than shoot them.
Bird trapping here in Malta is one of the oldest habits, and it takes place in such areas like here. Two rectangular nets, maybe 7 meters by 2 meters, are put alongside each other, like this. A rope is tied up from here to here, and then to a single rope for the man in charge in the hidden house. Many birds are around this area in cages to attract the ones in the air. When the ones in the air go in this empty space, the man in charge hidden here will pull the single rope, and these two nets cover this empty space. Where are the other birds?
That was Jimmy Bartlow. His regular hat is that of a chauffeur. Jim has driven a whole string of VIPs over the years. Tradition. There's another craft that the Maltese have proudly carried out for centuries. Despite the two great sieges, or perhaps because of them, the Maltese simply adore fireworks and big bangs. This is a family business.
I am 67, retired already. I'm just passing the time. This is my hobby. From 6:30 in the morning till 4:30, except Sunday. Sunday, half day. I do a lot of different jobs. You have to, everybody. The people come up here, they have to do everything. Of course, you need long years to learn everything. Well, I've been here, I've been working here since I was about 12 years of age. My brother, he is much older than me. He is about 75, and he was very young when he started coming up here. And the other brother, He was young. He's bigger than me as well. He's about 72. We have a feast in Gozo, and another one here, not far from here. And the profit we make from them, we do it just for our feast. In Leah, yes. And that will be 5th and 6th August. It will be 1 hour and a half non-stop. That will be a very big and nice display.
Tradition. Tradition. Maltese rabbit with oranges. And Maltese wine is traditional too. Cheers. Of course, the islands also offer international cuisine and fast food. But you'll find a surprising number of restaurants with very exotic cuisine.
Thank you very much.
Go in the center now. The center of the table. Rest. You help yourself.
And you'll never be at a loss for somewhere to stay in Malta, whatever your budget. From family hotels to a variety of complexes to 5-star accommodation, on land or at sea. Maltese food, and almost any other kind of food you could wish for. Malta by night. Tradition and techno. Techno and technology.
Just hold the number and mark it here. Say just 2 black.
Tradition and technology. That is Malta.